Hello and welcome to Current Affairs on JTV. Joining me today, we've got two guests. We have Meirav Sunshine, who's a journalist from Israeli-based magazine 972, and Noru Tzadik, editor of Politically Incorrect Politics and representative of reservists on duty. Thank you both for joining me today. Now, our topic today is one that's been in the news recently. It's the prospective or potential or non-potential move of the Israeli embassy, the US Israeli embassy, but perhaps others as well, to Jerusalem. Meirav, I'm going to start with you. Are you in favour of moving embassies to Jerusalem?
Well, I'll just start by saying that I think the first person you should probably be asking this question is a Palestinian who lives in East Jerusalem and who claims that region as his capital in a future state, his or her capital. My personal opinion on the matter isn't that important, but since you are asking me, I can tell you that if the U.S. goal is to recognize all of Jerusalem, including East Jerusalem, which was annexed by Israel in 1967, as the capital of Israel, and to prevent any formation of a Palestinian state in the future, then yes, it should definitely move its embassy to East Jerusalem.
Right, so, okay, so, well, you're saying East Jerusalem, you'll give me a very specific set of circumstances there. So you're saying that in some circumstances you'll be fine with a move to the embassy to Jerusalem, yes?
Well, I'm sorry, I guess I should have explained myself better. Jerusalem is divided into East and West, and presumably the embassy, the U.S. embassy, would be moved to, it could be West Jerusalem, it could be East Jerusalem, but because the entire city is currently occupied and annexed by Israel, then it's controversial, which is the reason why the U.S. has never, or any country for that matter, has moved its embassy there. So doing so would be a very provocative statement by the U.S., and would make clear its intentions about the future prospects for a Palestinian state, which is why I personally am not in favor of it, but I think that moving the embassy there would actually be perfectly in line with what Trump has signaled as his opinion of the situation here.
Okay, Noru, we'll unpack a little bit of what Meirav has said, but I just want your basic first sort of thoughts on whether embassies should be moved to Jerusalem.
Well, needless to say, I am all in favor for the embassy to move to Jerusalem, the US embassy, and all the other embassies, by the way. But speaking about the US embassy, I have real difficulty understanding Meirav's arguments. Let me say something. Moving the US embassy to Jerusalem is not some sort of favor that the Trump administration is going to give to Netanyahu. It's actually redressing an imbalance that exists today. The United States has a diplomatic mission to the Palestinians. It's called a consulate, but it's not really a consulate. It doesn't just deal with visas and protection of US citizens. It deals with political and diplomatic issues. It says so on their websites. And it's a mission, a diplomatic mission of the United States government, I'm reading from their websites, to the Palestinian Authority. That diplomatic mission is located in Jerusalem, not in Ramallah, in Jerusalem, actually in West Jerusalem, okay? So we have an absurd situation these days where the US diplomatic mission to the Palestinians is located in Jerusalem, again, not in Ramallah, in Jerusalem, but the diplomatic mission to Israel is located in Tel Aviv, okay? So if anything, it almost looks like the US government accepts, which is absurd, of course, but it's like they accept that the Palestinians have a sovereign right to all of Jerusalem. By moving the embassy to Israel to Jerusalem, we're not only doesn't it derail any sort of desire for the two-state solution and so on and so forth, all those quite frankly, bullshit that the Palestinian leadership uses, but it's actually redressing an imbalance, balancing that situation where both diplomatic missions are
in one place
in Jerusalem.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I have to say, and I don't really understand that. I don't understand why people like Meirav align themselves with this, frankly, intolerant and absurd Palestinian demand that the mission to them should be in Jerusalem, but the mission to Israel should be in Tel Aviv.
Right, Meirav, what's your view on that? I mean, Nora is saying you're aligning yourself on an unfair position because the Palestinians have their mission there. Any thoughts on that?
The Palestinians, who none of us are speaking with right now because they're not on this phone call, are a stateless, rightless people who have no state and no right. And East Jerusalem specifically was annexed by Israel in 1967, which doesn't make it any less occupied or any less problematic. No country in the world has recognized Israel's borders or has recognized the fact that its capital can be in this entire greater Jerusalem area. So Nori's point, it doesn't make any sense at all, because if you want to talk about balance, then how about you can maybe stop home demolitions and arrests of children in the middle of the night that Israel does in East Jerusalem and elsewhere on a fairly routine basis. Well, maybe we can start with that, and then we can talk about embassies and consulates.
Okay, well, there's a slightly two different points, but let me ask you a very simple question. You're presumably an Israeli citizen, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What's the capital of Israel?
If you ask any Israeli government official, they'll tell you Jerusalem.
I'm asking you.
It's recognized as, Jerusalem is recognized as the capital of Israel by Israel. Nobody else really recognizes it as such. It's very problematic.
So you would accept Jerusalem as the capital of Israel or not?
I would accept West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Okay. But let's assume that you've just given the definition that your fellow citizens have decided that it's all of Jerusalem. As you say, nobody else may have recognized that, but there's clearly a point of national self-determination there, that your fellow citizens have gone down that path. I mean, your position isn't a particularly attractive one to your fellow citizens, correct?
No, mostly because I don't feel that citizens can democratically elect to occupy another people and think that that's okay.
So you're saying that even though, as you stated, East Jerusalem was annexed, that doesn't matter in the great scheme of things?
No, because if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of what happens on day-to-day, Palestinians with permanent residency often have their residency revoked. I have plenty of friends who spend time abroad studying, and they get threatened with their residency being revoked, which means they would have literally no place to live with no rights at all. The situation in East Jerusalem is absolutely deplorable and intolerable, as it is in many other parts of the West Bank and Israel. So the question of moving the embassy or not, to me, is quite marginal when you talk about the basic human rights violations that are happening on a daily basis. I'm happy to recognize West Jerusalem as Israel's capital, but that really has no bearing on what Israel's doing to the Palestinian people on a daily basis.
Okay, Nora, do you recognize that as being a fair characterization of the situation?
Absolutely not. But quite frankly, I don't want to be drawn. I mean, that's a very typical tactic, quite fraudulently, of so-called pro-Palestinian activists. Which
I'm not a pro-Palestinian activist. I'm an Israeli.
Then I'm not speaking about you. But quite frankly, it's a tactic of mixing everything together and kind of defining Palestinians as the ultimate oppressed community. Whatever the historical frustrations and historical issues are there, they are not the ultimate oppressed community. And in any case, what does that all have to do with the issue of capital? And what is the capital of a state? I mean, the United States has, an embassy in Riyadh. It does not choose to punish Saudi Arabia, which is a huge violator of human rights. I mean, next to it, Israel is really the personified angel. And the United States does not move its embassy elsewhere to punish Saudi Arabia. What is happening here, it has nothing to do with Israel's behavior. It has nothing to do with the oppression of Palestinians. Meirav does not disagree, and nobody really disagrees that West Jerusalem, there's no disagreement about that West Jerusalem belongs to Israel. If there is any disagreement, is about East Jerusalem, even with people like Meirav. So I don't really understand what is the problem with moving the embassy to West Jerusalem. The only problem here is that the Palestinian leadership is playing the victimhood card and is trying to extract sweeping advantages from the international community, using that victimhood card, and quite frankly, using the threat of violence, which is even a more troubling issue. They're trying to transform a typical political decision where to put a diplomatic mission. They're trying to transform it into a religious issue, an attack on Muslims, an attack on Islam, and all that kind of discussion. If you read what Saeb Erekat said recently, it's basically he's threatening violence.
Okay.
I know it's a sovereign United States decision.
I understand that kind of context, but let me put it to Meirav, what you've just said, distill it in 1 second. So Nora's essentially saying, and you've agreed, that there's no conflict over West Jerusalem. You may have issues, there may be issues with East Jerusalem, there may be issues elsewhere, but it seems a little unusual, does it not, Meirav, that Israel's a democratic state. All democratic states have their bits of their capitals recognised, or the whole capital recognised. Surely it doesn't really matter where the embassy is. You yourself have said it doesn't really matter.
Let's put it a different way. It really doesn't matter. I think what matters is what U.S. policy is on Israeli-Palestinian future and human rights issues. About, for example, the aspect of threatening violence, Israel doesn't have to threaten violence because it has all the military power and it has all the control, and it uses it and it exerts violence. And I keep repeating this aspect because I think that it's not something that's under debate. It's simply the reality. As for the aspect of the embassy, the reason that no U.S. president has signed the waiver regarding the Embassy Act is because that it has to do more with internal U.S. politics about the difference between the branches, and the fact that the U.S. president is not willing to recognize all of Jerusalem as Israel has annexed it as an internationally recognized border. The reason that I say that I recognize West Jerusalem is because I'm going according to international norms, international law. That's what this has to do with.
Look, there is the of Cyprus, Nicosia, is a disputed city. In fact, the United States doesn't even recognize the northern part of the island as an independent state. And yet, it keeps its diplomatic mission in Nicosia, okay? And that, right now, they're talking about a possible peace deal, finally, in Cyprus. There's nothing about the U.S. embassy being there that has even been suspected of being an impediment to that deal.
So let me ask you why this.
Meirav, it's not about the infighting between the branches of the Americans.
So you're saying that every country in the world
blackmail. It's about blackmail.
Noru. Let me
ask you a question. It's not just the U.S. It's every country in the world. Are you assuming that they are all anti-Israel? That this is the norm? That this is why? That none of them have put their embassies in a territory that they consider?
They are unfortunately sensitive to political blackmail. Unfortunately, there are about 13 or 14 million Jews in the world.
I think that you have a lot of nerve talking about political blackmail, considering that Israel has continued to occupy.
It's absolutely blackmail, and you can see this now when the Palestinian leadership has threatened with violence, not just in Israel, not just in Jerusalem, but they're actually talking about some kind of religious war where the Muslims in the entire world would hate Americans and would hate the West because of this great crime of putting an embassy in West Jerusalem, in the Jewish capital, since biblical times.
Well, Meirav,
it's absurd.
Nora, let me stop for 1 second. Meirav, you have to concede there is something to what Nora is saying in the way the Palestinians are presenting their view of Jerusalem full stop. Because, of course, the infamous UNESCO decision last year stated that there was no evidence of a Jewish sort of historic claim to the land. Now, surely you don't believe that?
I don't understand your question. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm saying that obviously last year UNESCO ruled, there was a vote at the prompting of the Palestinians to declare that there was no evidence of Jewish historical content or element to Jerusalem at all.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not an anthropologist, and I'm not that. I mean, there are claims to the land by both peoples. Whether or not it's proven or not doesn't really interest me. And they both live there, and they both have been living there. And it is absolutely futile to try and deny either people the rights to live in this place. And they live in this place, and they will continue to live in this place. So I find this to be just irrelevant.
Okay, let's stop there because we run out of time. Thank you, lady. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. Thank you at home. We'll see you again soon for another episode of Current Affairs on JTV.